I crossed into another world hoping to become a legendary adventurer, but my teammates turned out to be a pack of beasts. The moment we ran into goblins, they shoved me out as a meat shield and all bolted. I fought for my life and only managed to turn the tables by using demon vines. Covered in wounds, I returned home, ready to give up my dream and become a gate guard, when suddenly, bang, a gold-red battle banner exploded open in my mind. Please choose your starting age. Damn it, my cheat finally showed up, late but not absent. I'm Wall, a transmigrator. Ever since I was old enough to remember, I've been obsessed with magic, monsters, and adventure. Without any talent for magic, I trained like hell, and before even coming of age I was already a certified warrior class professional. My dream was simple, to reach the pinnacle of legend in this other world, or die a satisfying death in some corner, which would at least live up to my craving for an exciting life when I died from overwork in my previous life. But reality slapped me hard across the face. The path of an adventurer was 100 times harder than I'd imagined. 3 months ago, I graduated from a professional school and was recommended into a large adventuring party, only to end up serving tea, fetching water, and washing underwear. Might as well have become a city guard. After quitting, I wanted to find an elite squad, but they had no shortage of warriors at all. Mages, priests, and thieves were the real VIPs. After getting scammed a few times, I lowered my standards and joined the lowest tier adventuring party, starting with the simplest missions. I figured I'd take it slow. After all, every legend fights their way up from the bottom. And then, today, my teammates sold me out. The hot winds of the summer tide season swept through the wild forest, and the rustling leaves sounded like a lullaby. I was following behind the Courage adventuring party, while that bastard Captain Bobby was still spouting grand rhetoric about how the road to becoming legends would begin today. Then a bunch of goblins wearing leaves and carrying bone clubs charged out. I didn't take these green-skinned runts seriously at all. I was a professional warrior who had mastered combat techniques, just about to show my strength and lead the team in a counterattack, when I turned around, and everyone had run off. They shoved me to the front as a meat shield and scattered in all directions. More than a dozen goblins waved stone hammers and wooden clubs, shrieking as they surrounded me. 2 fists can't beat 4 hands, and those morale-boosted monsters weren't going to give me a fair one-on-one fight. I could only hurl out my backpack, pivot into a charging slash, cut down 2 on the flank, and run like hell. As I sprinted through the forest, I cursed Bobby's ancestors for 18 generations in my heart, trusting that face of his would be worse than kissing a goblin's toes. Even while fleeing for my life, my professional school training hadn't been for nothing. I kept my eyes in every direction to avoid the raised humus and leaves underfoot, bent low to dodge the thick hanging vines, and forcibly lured the little bastards into a grove of sweet fruit trees. A giant demon vine lurked there, its tentacles as thick as pythons, and only intense light and fire could restrain it. So of course a normal warrior like me couldn't beat it. But this thing was dim-witted, and with enough knowledge and patience, it could be used. I found a hollow beneath a dead tree and crouched low inside it, then raised a middle finger at the charging goblins. The one in front got so furious it bared its jagged fangs and rallied all its companions into a victorious charge. I lay on my side, one hand gripping the sword hilt tight, and the other protecting my head, counting silently in my heart. 3, 2, whoosh. Thick vines moved without wind. Countless tentacles dropped from the canopy, and vines burst up from beneath the ground, sweeping around like snakes. The goblins that had been so smug just moments ago instantly dissolved into chaos. The vines whipped back and forth, and within seconds they were tightly entangled and crushed to death. I also took a few lashes across my back and arms. Even through the leather armor, it burned with pain, but I still didn't dare move an inch. Only after the vines slowly dragged the goblin corpses deep into the forest did I dare take off my mask and gasp for air. Those damn demonic vines. Its bounty had been posted in the Adventurers Hall for years with no one completing it. It really wasn't something I could afford to mess with. But at least today, it helped keep me alive. After resting for quite a while, I crept out of that territory on tiptoe. On the way, I even thought about retrieving the backpack I dropped during the goblin ambush. If I was lucky, the 2 corpses might still sell for a bit of money. But the backpack had been torn wide open, and the dried rations, bedroll, medicinal powder, and spare fire starter inside were all gone. The 2 goblin corpses were also reduced to nothing but 2 puddles of filthy blood. That was property worth more than 1 big silver moon, enough to cover my food for a month. Damn Courage adventuring party. Damn Bobby, you'd better die in the mountains and never let me run into you again. I kept cursing, but I didn't dare slow my steps for even a moment. The sky was getting darker and darker, and spending the night alone in the wild was just asking to die. I had to get back to Greenwood Town before it got completely dark. After walking along the muddy dirt road for 3 hours, I finally saw the town sprawled across the mountainside in the distance. The tall Mage Tower in the upper district stretched toward the starry sky like a giant's arm. You could see it even from the lower city gate. In that moment, I felt like I had returned to the civilized world. Under the city gate, I scraped the clay off my boots while taking off my helmet to scratch my limp silver-gray short hair. Hey, adventurer over there, that is not something a powerful class holder should be doing, came an affected voice as a tall figure strode over. Without even raising my head, I kept scraping off the mud and spread my hands. Guard, sir, I'm just a poor mercenary who couldn't complete a job. I don't have money to pay a fine. The man looked me up and down, saw that I wasn't injured, then glanced at my tattered backpack before suddenly punching me in the chest. Wall, you're a warrior class holder. How did you end up in such a sorry state? For this bunch of silver ramgrass? Needing this at such a young age already. The man was Ted. We had grown up together and had even been classmates at the Riderhawk City Classholder School a few years ago. I scraped the last bit of mud off my boot hard and smiled helplessly. That bastard Bobby screwed me over badly. We ran into more than a dozen goblins in the mountains, and they ran faster than rats. After summarizing it in a few words, I suddenly stuffed the herbs from my backpack into the inner pocket of his robe. I heard you've been married for half a year and still don't have any kids. This is fresh stuff I risked my life to get from the mountains. Ted had been worried sick for me, but after that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't refuse, though, and draped an arm around my shoulder as we headed toward the gate. I'm strong as an ox, I don't need this, but my old man is getting on in years. You know. We exchanged a look and both showed the kind of smile all men understand. After chatting a bit, I felt much lighter. Just as I was about to say goodbye, he suddenly called out to stop me, then took out something the size of a palm from the guard barracks. Happy birthday, Walt. It felt cold in my hand, a delicate metal badge. I froze for a moment before remembering that today really did seem to be my birthday. In this strange world, there was actually someone who still remembered. I accepted the gift and bumped fists with him, a surge of indescribable emotion rising in my heart. We agreed that in a few days I'd treat him to a drink at the Adventurer Tavern. And only after watching Ted walk up to the city wall laughing and chatting with his colleagues did I turn and leave. Crossing the stone-paved avenue, I turned into a chaotic side street and first dropped a small silver coin at the old tavern, ordering 2 deluxe steak set meals before quickly ducking into a small alley. A 2-story stone-in wood house stood before me. Home at last. I had just pulled out my copper key when a low growl sounded from inside. The moment I opened the door, a huge pale blue dog head shoved it wide open. I rubbed its head hard. Qinglang, I'm back. I'll get you something tasty today to make it up to you. Qinglang was a mighty big dog with dire wolf blood, nearly a meter tall at the shoulder, but there were several huge, mangy-looking scars on its neck and back, old wounds left from years of fighting alongside my father. It was too old. It had already been helping my father before I was born. Now every time I go out, I lock it in the house, only hoping it can stay with me a little longer. I took off my leather armor and checked the stored dry rations and water. The food and water consumption was normal, nothing wrong, so I took 3 copper coins and went to the public bathhouse. The moment the hot water poured down, all the exhaustion in my body came rushing up. Sitting in the tub, my hazy mind thought that maybe being a guard wasn't so bad. Steady like Ted. With my warrior talent, becoming a captain of the guard in the future wouldn't be difficult either. Just then, a sudden blare of horns exploded in my mind. The clash of metal ringing out like lightning splitting open a dark rain curtain. A banner woven of gold and crimson unfurled in my consciousness. You choose to begin adventuring at the age of _____. I shot to my feet from the tub, startling the old man next door. He had just been about to curse, but when he saw my thick arms and sharply defined abs, he swallowed the profanity back down. I ignored him and frowned as I scanned the room. It seemed only I could hear that voice just now. The gold-crimson war banner hung there in my consciousness, light flowing across it. It wasn't a hallucination, and it wasn't some demon's trick. It's my cheat. I hurriedly dried off, threw on a short shirt and cloth clothes, and ran home. The waiter had just delivered the steak set meal. I tossed him a copper coin as a tip, locked the door, set 1 serving of steak on Qinglang's low table, then rushed upstairs to the bedroom and sat cross-legged on the bed, starting to study the thing in my head. This thing was a lot like a game I had played in my previous life. If my guess was right, The older the starting age you chose, the more initial points you would get. But I didn't want to wait even a moment longer. Focusing my will, I made my choice. You choose to begin adventuring at the age of 20. With a sharp shing of blades leaving their sheaths, the war banner fluttered, revealing 3 sections: personal, troops, family. A stream of information poured into my mind, and I instantly understood how to use this war banner. It was a divine artifact of war, and it had given me a second life. A huge grin spread across my face. View personal. Wall Vitoja level, 10/200 attributes, strength 14, constitution 13, agility 12, intelligence 12, perception 13. Charisma 15 skills, one-handed weapons 70, two-handed weapons 40, polearms 50, shield defense 30, archery 35, crossbows 40, throwing 40. Stealth 20, riding 28, running 45, scouting 20, tactics 15, social 40, leadership 10, trade 10, management 25. Medicine 10 trait. Longevity, possesses extraordinary bloodline. Lifespan increased by 20%. Assignable points. Attribute points 2, skill points 60. The interface did not show my core ability as a professional warrior, breath recovery. That was the power of the native class system, able to instantly activate vitality to restore injuries and stamina. What the war banner recorded was its own skill system, including training, smithing, theft, engineering, beast taming, and so on. As long as skill points were invested, they could be quickly mastered. I wasn't disappointed. Just the ability to improve attributes and break past limits greatly increased my chances of reaching legend. As for the path of a class professional, I could walk it on my own too. Looking at the 2 attribute points and 60 skill points above, my heart itched with excitement, and I could hardly wait to experience the thrill of growing stronger. But reason suppressed the impulse. Better finish reviewing all the panels first. I opened the troop panel. Troops. Troops that can be formed. 1 First Walls Party Morale 100 Soldiers 125th Prisoners 0/5. The party limit is made up of family level plus 10 plus the charm attribute 15, making it exactly 25 people at present. The prisoner limit is based on the steward skill. With 25 proficiency, you can only hold 5 prisoners. Any more than that, and they will escape, and they also cannot be recruited. This was obvious. The troop panel was the core. Recruitment, upgrades, prisoners, recruitment of prisoners, using war to sustain war, quickly snowballing. Then he opened the family panel. Family, Vitoya Family Prestige. Level 0 100th members 1/3. Wall of Vitoya Prestige Level 0 bonus. Family members plus 2. Party limit plus 10 according to Wall's research. This divine artifact could provide 2 ways to level up. One way was as a family member. Each level up would provide attribute points and skill points, and various skills could also continuously improve through use. The other way was as a soldier, whose upgrades and enhancements followed a fixed path, like a mold, forging soldiers with different attributes and abilities into nearly identical forms. Of course, this would not erase the soldiers' original talents and abilities. It merely raised the lower limit of their capabilities. After all, soldiers and family members could also be converted into each other. What delighted Wall the most, however, was the morale field that he had almost overlooked just now. Not only would it report to Wall in real time whether the army's spirit was stable or wavering, more importantly, it guaranteed the troops' loyalty. Even if morale dropped to 0, the soldiers would only quietly leave the party, rather than rebel. Wall suddenly sat up in bed, his smile radiant as he spread his arms as if to embrace the world. What a wonderful start. I will have the most loyal companions in the world. In this world of gods and demons, trust between people is sorely lacking. Every year, countless adventurer groups fall apart because of internal conflicts, and treasure and betrayal are so often told together by bards, as if they were destined to appear side by side. But from now on, Wall would never have to worry about that again. After his excitement faded, Wall quickly drew up a new plan for himself. I'm going to found a new adventurer group myself, then recruit men and horses, and take on missions to make money. But on second thought, adventurer groups generally use a profit-sharing model, where any money earned is distributed proportionally among everyone, while buying equipment and learning skills are paid for out of pocket, and people are free to come and go, with a very high degree of autonomy. This did not fit Wall's future plans, because the leveling ability of this divine artifact was itself an extremely rare resource. If the teammates he cultivated had too much autonomy and could leave the group at will or disobey orders, that would be a waste of resources. If I want to have absolute authority within the team, then I can only start cultivating them from scratch. That means Wall would have to pay all his subordinates wages, rain or shine. Unlike ordinary adventurer groups where if they fail to complete a mission, everyone goes hungry on their own. At the same time, this force would be entirely Wall's private army, and one person alone could decide which missions to take. While the rewards gained could also be allocated by one person, maximizing the use of resources. After repeated consideration, in the end, Wall still decided to build up his own mercenary company from scratch, rather than form an adventurer group. Since that was the case, the allocation of attribute points and skill points would have to be adjusted somewhat. Originally, Wall had wanted to put the attribute points into strength, and the skill points into two-handed weapons, greatly boosting his combat power. But now he was prepared to focus more of his energy on military matters, set aside personal combat power for the moment, and first improve his ability to protect himself. With a slight movement of Wall's mind, War Banner, allocate points. Constitution 13, Constitution 15, a surge of warmth continuously welled up from inside his body, as if he were soaking in a hot spring, indescribably comfortable. But Wall did not relax and enjoy this pleasant sensation. Instead, he quickly jumped off the bed and assumed a training stance. Only after the warm current had fully merged into his body did Wall open his eyes in shock. Increasing the Constitution attribute could actually expand the upper limit of vitality. As a warrior class professional, Wall had strong control over his body and could even mobilize vitality to unleash skills, such as recover breath and combo slash. A higher vitality limit meant being able to use more skills, and in battle, that was the difference between life and death. Thinking of this, Wall came up with another new idea. If attribute points could increase the upper limit of vitality, then could Green Wolf also. There was no loss in trying, so Wall immediately opened the door, and after a few leaps arrived beside the doghouse. At this moment, Green Wolf was already fast asleep, making soft snoring sounds, and Wall's arrival did not wake him. After returning to Greenwood Town, Green Wolf had become even sleepier and sleepier. Wall was truly worried that one day this old companion would fall asleep and never wake up. "Oi, Green Wolf, wake up!" Wall crouched down, held Green Wolf's muzzle, and gently shook it. Green Wolf slowly opened his eyes, yawned, and lightly licked Wall's palm. Wall patted the dog's head, took one of its paws, and following the War Banner's recruitment process, suddenly said seriously, "Let's get straight to business. I need someone like you to join my team." Green Wolf tilted his head slightly, not understanding what his young master was saying, but still let out two soft barks in response. Woo Wolf Wall's lips curled up with delight, because he saw a prompt pop up on the War Banner. Veteran War Dog. Wages, 1 full meal/day, recruit. Yes, no, he did not hesitate, and with a thought, recruit. Green Wolf had originally been drooping his eyelids, looking extremely drowsy, but the next second, it was as if a fresh burst of vitality had been injected into him. Not only did the drowsiness vanish, he even got up, stuck his rear in the air, and gave a big stretch. Wall, meanwhile, saw more information on the War Banner. Green Wolf, Veteran War Dog Level 4, 455 out of 1000, Upgrade Path Elite War Dog Level 5. Looking at Green Wolf, who had regained some of his vitality, Wall nodded to himself. This divine artifact, the War Banner, was indeed powerful. Simply by joining the troops, it could lock in one's condition. Unless one died in battle or of old age directly, one's condition would no longer decline. However, Wall was not satisfied with just this. He made an adjustment, pulling Green Wolf from the Soldier series into the family member sequence. Green Wolf, Vitoya level 10, 200 attributes, Strength 12, Constitution 14, Agility 15, Intelligence 8, Perception 14, Charisma 8 skills, One-handed weapon 45, Stealth 110, Running 130, Scouting 150 trait. Wolf Hide, Direwolf Bloodline, giving your fur stronger resistance allocable points. Attribute points 1, skill points 30. What an excellent scout. Scratching under Green Wolf's chin, Wall felt somewhat delighted. Green Wolf was an excellent war dog. If he could recover to his peak condition, occupying a family member slot would not be a waste. War Banner, assign points. Green Wolf, Vitoya. Constitution 14, Constitution 15. In the next instant, Green Wolf, who had been enjoying Wall's petting, suddenly gave a full body shudder, then turned around in place twice, and began scratching at the scars on his neck and back with his hind leg. He whimpered, seeming very itchy. Wall did not stop him, because although Green Wolf was acting a little strangely, his movements were still gentle, clearly showing that he had not lost his reason. Fur immediately flew everywhere, and a few seconds later, Green Wolf coughed up a dark red clump of fur, seeming to feel instantly relieved. Woof woof. The bark was full and powerful, nothing like what a dying old dog should sound like. Its fur had grown back in full, a sharp gleam shone from its cloudy eyes, and even its ears had stood up again, making it look full of vigor and spirit. Golden sunlight pierced the darkness, spreading light across the mortal world. Just as Wall held the divine kingdom aloft in one hand and tore apart the 888th great demon of hell with the other, he suddenly felt that something was off. Someone had been staring at him all along. He abruptly opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was the large head of a big dog with bluish-white fur, calmly staring at him. "Good morning, Green Wolf. You're looking full of energy." Patting Green Wolf's sturdy body, Wall immediately broke into a smile. Those attribute points from yesterday really worked instantly, as if Green Wolf had returned to how it was 10 years ago. Only its eyebrows, whiskers, and the tips of its ears were still white, and its temperament remained calm, not becoming lively just because its body had recovered. After a simple wash-up, Wall began the first step of his grand plan, taking stock of his assets. There were 11 gold coins and 3 large silver moons in the bank, plus a complete set of heavy plate and chain armor, and he also had 3 small silver moons on hand. That wasn't nearly enough. The money Wall was using now was the new imperial currency introduced by the Empire only a few decades ago. With 1 gold coin equal to 10 large silver moons, 100 small silver moons, and 1,000 copper coins. Although gold coins had very high purchasing power for a mercenary who needed to fight, the daily wage was about 10 copper coins, 300 copper coins a month, and 3,600 copper coins a year, which was 3.6 gold coins. In other words, Wall's current savings were only enough to hire 3 people for a year, and that was just the base pay. Food and equipment were even more of a bottomless pit. Holding a charcoal pencil, Wall scribbled and calculated on paper, while Green Wolf crouched beside him and watched without blinking, as if finding it very interesting. The blazing red sun rose high into the sky, doing its best to pour the last heat of the summer tide season onto the earth. By this time, Wall had also made his decision. Sell this house and use it as startup capital. Selling Grandpa's land without a second thought. Although it was his old man's inheritance, Wall did not feel much attachment to it. After all, when Wall was 10 years old, his father in this life had died heroically on the battlefield, leaving him a pension of 20 gold coins, a damaged set of heavy plate and chain armor, as well as a house and a scar-covered big dog. After that, Wall quickly rented out the house, deposited the gold coins and armor in the Imperial Bank, and then ran off to Eagle City, where he began attending the Imperial Vocational School for Professionals. After so much time had passed, the fact that Wall still had this much property showed that he had lived quite frugally. But save where you should save, and spend where you should spend. Houses in this world would not keep appreciating forever. After all, Greenwood Town was still too close to the mountains, and who knew when the monsters inside might come charging out. Compared with fixed assets, Wall still felt that strength was more important. Besides, if he didn't dare to go all in before his cheat awakened, and still didn't dare after it awakened, then wouldn't the cheat have awakened for nothing? Having made up his mind, Wall rubbed Green Wolf's head, put on the leather armor after wiping it down, hung a decorative leash around Green Wolf's neck, made sure there was nothing valuable left in the house, and only then headed out. This was the one bad thing about another world. Thieves were too capable. As long as no one was home, someone would come help clean out the house, and locks could only keep out honest men. Leading Green Wolf out of the alley, the outside was already bustling. Quite a few free folk from nearby farms were selling their produce, and fresh vegetables and fruit were very popular. Wall was tall and strongly built. Not only was he wearing armor, with a sharp blade at his waist and a fierce hound on a leash, passers-by quickly made way for him. If it weren't still on the leash, someone would have called the guards already. He didn't care. Making his way upward, spending 2 copper coins, he bought a few flatbreads from a roadside stall and shared them with the Blue Wolf. Before long, a city gate came into view, with a squad of well-equipped soldiers guarding the entrance. Wall took out a gray stiff leather card about the size of a palm, which recorded his identity. Wool Vitoya, Red Copper Adventurer. What are you going to the Upper District for? Why are you bringing a pet? After checking his identification, the guard began the routine questioning. Going to the Imperial Bank. Wall answered calmly. The guard gave no reaction, and began writing it down on paper. After spending more than 10 minutes, he finally warned. Keep your little pet under control. If it barks or frightens other people, you should know the consequences. Without looking back, Wool continued uphill. He knew that in fact, just a few copper coins would make the guards turn a blind eye, and a single small silver moon would even bring a friendly smile to their faces. But there was no point in that. Better to buy a piece of meat to eat. The upper district was much quieter than the lower district. The shops lining the streets were all quite grand, and some were even decorated with magic lamps resembling neon lights, so dazzling they could leave people lightheaded even in broad daylight. Most of the goods sold here had something to do with magic, so naturally the prices were frighteningly high. The pedestrians on the street were dressed in bright colors, yet the sense of distance between people was even stronger. Wool passed through the streets and soon arrived at his destination, a magnificent and resplendent enormous courtyard. At the entrance to the Imperial Bank, two guards like metal statues stood holding halberds, their bodies radiating wondrous magical glimmers. Clearly, this equipment was no ordinary stuff. What extravagance! Wool swallowed hard and forced himself to look away, then went to the window to handle his business. The Imperial Bank worked very efficiently, and Wool soon received a heavy bag of coins. We will send a staff member to assess your house. It can be listed for sale as early as next week at the latest. If you move out before then, please remember to provide us with your new contact address. The short halfling manager escorted Wool out of the Imperial Bank. His smile was impeccable, and he bowed slightly. Thank you for your trust in the Imperial Bank. We look forward to your next visit. Wool waved his hand and led the blue wolf, which had managed to get a meal of pet food, back toward the lower district, still calculating in his mind. According to the Imperial Bank's preliminary valuation, the house should fetch about 50 gold coins, enough to support a force of 20 men for a while, sufficient to get me through the hardest period. Besides selling the house, Wool also withdrew 5 gold coins in savings from the bank, planning to recruit a few people first and see whether his idea could be realized. As he was thinking, Wool suddenly felt an unusual tug on the leash in his hand. The blue wolf seemed to casually swat Wool's thigh with its thick, powerful tail. Wool instantly understood. This meant the blue wolf had noticed someone had their eyes on him. He observed his surroundings from the corner of his eye, but found nothing. It must be those thieves again, such an annoying bunch of flies. To Wool, these people were even more troublesome than goblins in the wild. At least goblins could be cut down with a single sword strike without any pressure. But even if you caught these thieves, at most you could only give them a severe beating. Killing them was against the law, and if you beat them too badly, you'd invite group retaliation. Wool, all alone in the world, simply couldn't afford to provoke them, so he could only keep a close eye on his wallet. Fortunately, with the blue wolf, whose body had recovered, around, ordinary thieves probably wouldn't be borrowing his money anymore. Soon, Wool returned to the lower district, where there were even more people, forcing him to be extra vigilant and quicken his pace. Hey, buddy, your pet bit me. You need to keep it under control. At the street corner, a middle-aged man dressed like a farmer suddenly stumbled, fell to the ground clutching his arm, and instantly caused a commotion. The surrounding crowd quickly scattered to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Vol didn't believe the man's story at all. Gripping his sword hilt, he was about to step forward and argue, when the blue wolf suddenly turned around, opened its bloody maw and bit toward the side of his waist. An enemy. Only then did Vol sense the abnormality behind him. He immediately spun and drove an elbow back while drawing the long sword at his waist. Shing-ah! A scream rang out, but Vol didn't feel like he had hit anything. His gaze swept over the area, and he only saw a short figure roll into the shadow of the crowd and disappear, leaving only a few drops of blood on the ground. When Vol turned back, sure enough, the middle-aged man who had been shouting just now had also vanished, and the surrounding pedestrians all seemed unsurprised. Seeing the excitement was over, they all shook their heads and dispersed. Clearly, this was a feint-and-strike diversion commonly used by thieves, and novice adventurers like Vol were easily taken in by it. He had heard of it before, but this was his first time experiencing it. It wasn't because he had been lucky before, only that he had never carried this much money on him. Fortunately, Vol still had Blue Wolf, his elder, with him. Compared to the somewhat flustered Vol, Blue Wolf had been completely at ease from beginning to end, without even a change in its breathing rhythm. Even after the enemy fled, it had no intention of giving chase, only licking the corner of its mouth before lowering its head to carefully sniff the drops of blood. Vol patted Blue Wolf's sturdy back and said lightly, "Thanks for your hard work, Blue Wolf. I'll treat you to a feast at noon." Blue Wolf raised its head, its ears twitching, then shook its head and led Vol downward. Vol also quickened his pace, growing even more eager for his companions. If he had a few more people traveling with him, those thieves wouldn't dare use such tricks at all. Although Aoki City was one of only 3 large population centers in the Swift Eagle territory, the space inside the city itself was not very large. After walking for a few minutes, Val saw the towering outer city wall and the bustling market below it. Adventurer Market. This was stipulated by the Empire's Adventurer Registration Act, the designated area where adventurers accepted and posted missions, and also the place where adventurers conducted trade. Dressed as he was, Val looked quite ordinary here, because almost everyone here wore armor and carried weapons. Moreover, there were also many non-human races here. Beast folk with animal features, barbarians with flatter and rounder faces, and short-statured halflings, as well as short but sturdy dwarfs. At the same time, Val also saw a few high elves who, like him, had pointed ears, but whose hair and pupils shone as brilliantly as gold. The shops and stalls along these streets did not sell vegetables or fruit, but all kinds of monster parts, weapons, potions, and treasures freshly dug out of ruins. After Val had only strolled a few steps, he spotted an old familiar sight spread out on the ground. Freshly butchered goblin, all brand new materials. Just look at this big spear, the effect is absolutely first-rate. The stall owner was a middle-aged man with a mouthful of yellow teeth. Holding a steel fork and wearing a short dagger at his waist, he sprayed spittle everywhere as he pitched his wares to the rookie onlookers around him. On the stall, a goblin had been dismembered into parts, and its penis had been cut off intact, deliberately placed on top of the goblin's mangled, bloody head for display. Seeing this, Val thought of the 2 goblin corpses he had lost yesterday. Even if he had only skinned their scalps, he could have sold them for over 100 copper coins. That was excellent material for leather boots. And the older they were, the more valuable they became. Looking at how tempted those young adventurers seemed, he shook his head slightly. Any adventurer who had gone to school knew that goblin parts simply didn't have that effect. And eating monster materials directly will cause contamination, and then you'd have to go to the church for an exorcism. But Wall wasn't one to meddle, so after taking 2 glances, he continued forward. Very soon, a large square appeared before his eyes. He had arrived. This was the mission square. This was the place where low-rank adventurers, namely black iron and red copper adventurers, accepted missions. But in a densely populated place like Aoki Town, it had turned into a place where mission issuers selected and hired people. Since there were too many monks and too little porridge, and most low-rank adventurers did not have combat professions, and were only here to scrape out a living. 100 years ago, before that Emperor Peter on the copper coins abolished slavery, places like this were even called slave markets. And these were exactly the kind of people Wall was looking for, those who had nothing, or who needed money for some reason, and who dared to see blood and take risks. Walking up to a window, Wall first showed his identity badge, then took out a small silver moon from his clothes. I want to post a recruitment mission, long-term work, involving combat. The receptionist lady behind the counter, who had been polishing her nails, put on a professional smile. After taking the silver coin, she examined it carefully and confirmed that the magical coating on it was as bright as new. And only then did she hand over a form. Esteemed adventurer, please fill out the form first and indicate your requirements and salary below. Wall finished writing it very quickly. Recruiting 10 people. Requirements: able to endure hardship and obey commands. As for pay, it was tentatively set at a weekly wage of 40 copper coins, with additional rewards based on performance if combat occurred. And meals and lodging would be provided, along with free combat training. The receptionist lady took a look and saw that this seemed to be a long-term guard job, but it did not require combat skills, placed no restrictions on race, and the pay was also slightly above average. Overall, this was a commission that would be very easy to fulfill. However, Wall added at the end, I want to do the screening myself. The receptionist naturally had no objection. This would even save having to assign one more staff member. Very soon, the mission commission was publicized, and following the directions, Wall walked to a low wooden platform in one corner of the square. Wall stroked Qinglong's big head and was pondering the arrangements to come when suddenly a stir ran through the square, and a large crowd surged this way, including quite a few demi-humans and barbarians. Several nearby guards hurried to maintain order and had the people crowding over line up properly. Only then did Wall learn that these people had actually all come here to apply to him. The Empire's new farmstead bill was truly impressive. A problem left over for 1,000 years seemed to have been mostly resolved by now. The Empire's humans and these other races had not always been this peaceful. Wall's father had previously been fighting those unruly demi-human tribes. As a transmigrator, Wall was especially interested in history, but unfortunately professional schools did not teach this kind of knowledge, so he could only glean fragments in the library. Even just that had given Wall a greater understanding of the Empire, that colossal entity whose full name was the Holy Knight Empire of Dragonia, than most people in the Empire. That emperor who had already been on the throne for more than 100 years, the legendary dragon slayer Emperor Peter Dragon, was driving this enormous chariot ever faster forward. But at least for now, everything seemed to be developing in a good direction. Now, Wall 2 had become a beneficiary of the Empire's policies. Several dozen young and strong demi-humans and barbarians stood on the wooden platform like merchandise, waiting for Wall to make his selection. This was already the result after preliminary screening. Women, children, and those with illnesses had been excluded first. Although in this other world, gender likewise could not determine ability, Wall was self-aware. His management skills were still too poor, and a mixed-gender unit was completely beyond his abilities. Then there were those frivolous, slick middle-aged men, whom Wall also ruled out. These people would be difficult to manage as well. Naturally, those left were more reserved young people. They might not be physically strong, and they might lack experience, but they all had potential and could follow orders. Wall beckoned to the stage and called over a demi-human with slender bull horns growing from his head. "Hello, sir." Although the employer before him looked very young, the horned demi-human still could not help feeling a little nervous. He was nearly 1.9 meters tall, with a sturdy frame. And aside from the bull horns on his head, he was almost no different from a human. His back was slightly hunched, and he wore a short-sleeved linen shirt that did not fit him very well, making him look somewhat embarrassed. Wall nodded inwardly in satisfaction, but on the surface calmly began asking, "What's your name? Where are you from? What kind of work have you done before? How many people are in your family?" The horned demi-human answered honestly one by one. "My name's Horn. I'm from Casimo Farm. I used to only work the fields. Oh, and I've carried lumber too." Then he counted on his fingers. "At home there's still Pa, Ma, my older brother, younger sister." Wall nodded. Although he did not know where this Casimo Farm was, it was probably not far from Green Tree Town. And as for the other party's family situation, he estimated there was no other way. So he could only come out and find food for himself. Very good. This was exactly the kind of person he was looking for. Keeping a stern face, Wall asked seriously, "This job of mine involves fighting. Are you afraid of seeing blood?" Horn hesitated for a moment, then shook his head firmly. "I ain't afraid. As long as it's like what's written on that paper, 40 copper coins a week. Whoever you say to beat, I'll beat." Wall finally showed a smile and patted the young man's arm, telling him to stand to one side and wait. Then Wall beckoned to the stage again, and a young man wearing a brown fur coat in the sweltering heat strode over. This man was slightly shorter than Wall, with short red hair, dark skin, a large bundle on his back, and caution in his eyes. "Good afternoon, sir." Hearing this imperial language mixed with a slight accent, Wall nodded and repeated the same questions as before. "My name is Jamuka, and I am a homeless man. I used to hunt, and I know how to shoot a bow and make traps. I'm the only one in my family." Jamuka answered in an orderly and calm manner. After thinking for a moment, Wall continued, "Why did you come here?" Jamuka was a little surprised by the question. He tightened the bundle on his back and sighed softly. 2 years ago, the northern grasslands suffered a white disaster, and I only survived thanks to the relief of His Majesty Peter. But they said there was too much pressure on the food supply over there, so I followed the migrant convoy to the interior of the Holy Empire." Wall nodded and also patted his shoulder, telling him to wait to the side. With nothing at all, possessing fighting ability, and still willing to work honestly, this was exactly the kind of person he was looking for. Wall continued his interviews, but the next several people were not very satisfactory. Some were the only son in their family, some already had children and could not leave home for too far, and some were stubbornly attached to certain obsessions. There were even several demi-humans who believed in the evil gods among the 7 gods. Although the Empire did not prohibit it, Wall would not recruit such people into the team. Fortunately, there were enough applicants, and in the end Wall still managed to fill all 10 positions. Besides Horn and Jamuka, there were also 3 humans who had fled from the Eastern Empire, 2 demi-humans with orange beast ears, and 3 mixed-blood barbarians who had left the farms to venture into the world alone. As the unsuccessful applicants left in disappointment, Wall brought the 10 young people, both nervous and excited, to the previous window and signed employment contracts with them one by one. The Empire is a country governed by law, so naturally it cannot rely on verbal agreements to maintain employment relationships. Not only must contracts be signed, but the Empire also has a dedicated legal enforcement department, which investigates the execution of contracts at regular intervals. And the punishments are severe. In serious cases, one might even be arrested and beheaded. Nature of work: combat-related, salary, 40 copper coins per week, paid weekly, food provided, no less than 2 copper coins per day, contract term, 1 year. The young receptionist read aloud the pre-drafted contract to the illiterate youths. It stated the responsibilities and obligations of both parties, as well as the punishments for violations. After the clauses were explained, neither side had any objections. Vol took out a shiny large silver moon he had prepared from his clothes, brushed his finger over the face of Saint Dragon 2 on it, and placed it into the window. The Imperial Department did not serve as a notary for free, but the price was not high. Only 10 copper coins needed to be paid for each contract. Both parties signed their names on the contract and pressed their fingerprints on it, which meant the contract had officially begun. Finally, the young receptionist reminded him, "This is your first time hiring people, so both parties to the contract must return here every month for verification. And failing to verify for more than 3 months would constitute a violation of Imperial law." After thanking her for the reminder, Vol left with his employees, though he felt something rather strange in his heart. Compared with his previous life, the Empire's laws seemed crude, but when it came to employment relations, they were exceptionally good. The 10 young people followed closely behind Vol and stopped in a less crowded corner of the square. Vol waved his hand, had them gather around, and instructed, "We've already gotten acquainted just now. Starting today, you are my soldiers, and you will obey my command." Hearing the lecture, everyone kept their faces tense and seemed somewhat at a loss, replying unevenly, "Yes, sir. Okay, we will follow your orders." While feeling around inside his clothes, Vol said loudly, "Horn, step forward." Hearing his name, Horn jolted at once, and stiffly took 2 steps forward before saying nervously, "I'm here, sir." The next second, Vol revealed a smile and handed over the small silver moon in his hand, with the Conqueror Saint Pander gleaming brightly on it. "Sir, this." Horn widened his eyes, opening his mouth without knowing what to say, while his hand had already instinctively reached out to catch the shining silver coin. Vol patted Horn on the shoulder. "Horn, this is your salary for the first week. They're yours now. Also call me Captain." Horn grinned happily, clutching the silver coin in his hand. His nervousness and other negative emotions were swept away, and he couldn't help but straighten his back a little as he shouted in reply, "Yes, Captain." Then Vol called out each person's name in turn, and personally paid out the first week's wages in advance. The atmosphere of the team visibly became more harmonious as a result. After all, who would dislike a boss who pays wages before the work has even started, even if this was wage they had rightfully earned? At the same time, Vol finally saw the information he wanted. Horn, Farmer Level 0, has joined Vol's team. Jamuka, Militia Level 1, has joined Vol's team. 10 prompts sounded in succession, and the troops section in the war banner was also expanded. Troops can form Troops 1 1st Vol's team. Morale 52 soldiers, 12 25th prisoners 0 5ths. With a thought from Vol, the soldiers section immediately expanded. Soldiers December 25th Vol Vitoya, January 1st Blue Wolf Vitoya, January 1st Farmers Level 0, September 9th Militia Level 1, and 1st Vol very much wanted to immediately begin studying the more detailed information displayed by the Divine Artifact War banner, but he also could not just leave his newly recruited soldiers unattended. Seeing how happy everyone was, Vol simply waved his hand and said, "I'll give you 1 hour of free time." Before lunch, everyone gathered at the Adventurer's Tavern. The 10 young men were even more delighted, thinking they had truly met a generous and benevolent employer, and they all thanked Vol again. The soldiers took the money and left. But Vol was not worried that anyone would run off with the money. No one would break Imperial law for just 40 copper coins. In the battle flag panel, the information in the troop column also had not changed, which showed that these soldiers were not like Vol had feared, only able to rigidly follow him into battle, but could be sent out to do things. He patted the blue wolf's neck, and the man and dog walked toward the other side of the square. At this moment, the Adventurers Guild morning market had already dispersed. The adventurers who had taken missions had already left to carry them out, and the adventurers who had not taken missions had also gone elsewhere to get some food to deal with their hunger. The few adventurers who remained were also hurrying along. Very soon, Vol arrived at his destination. One-legged tavern. This tavern had the most delicious stew, but it could hardly be called clean. There was even still a lingering smell of vomit, though the place was fairly spacious, with heavy solid wood tables and chairs arranged neatly. However, there was hardly anyone inside, only a young waiter polishing the glasses at the bar. Vol sat down directly on a stool by the entrance. closed his eyes, and pretended to rest, while in fact beginning to check the information inside the battle flag. Farmer level 0, 26 50th attributes, Strength 10, Constitution 10, Agility 10, Intelligence 10, Perception 10, Charisma 10 skills, one-handed weapons 20, polearms 20. The farmer's attributes were very balanced, and the panels for all 9 farmers were identical, with only slight differences in experience points. Vol naturally did not think he had recruited clones, but rather that it confirmed his guess from yesterday. Sure enough, the soldier templates of the divine battle flag would only keep raising the lower limit of those they were bestowed upon. Their real-world strength might slightly exceed what was shown on the panel. Vol nodded inwardly and continued checking the militia's attributes. Militia level 1, 55 out of 100 attributes, Strength 11, Constitution 10, Agility 10, Intelligence 10, Perception 10, Charisma 10 skills, one-handed weapons 25, polearms 35, running 20. This was Zamo's panel. The militia template had 1 more point of strength than the farmer template. All skill proficiencies had improved, and there was also an extra running skill. However, this should not be all of Zamo's abilities, because he had said he could bend a bow and shoot arrows, which also proved Vol's earlier guess. He continued looking at the directions for unit advancement. Farmer level 0, Militia level 1. The farmer's only advancement path was Militia. Militia level 1, Sword and Shield Trainee level 2, /Bow and Crossbow, Trainee level 2, /Spearman, Trainee level 2, /Scout, Trainee level 2. There were 4 advancement paths for Militia. Although he could not understand their attributes, he could roughly guess from the names. Vol stroked the dog's head, his brows slightly furrowed. The soldier's combat power only required training and battle. Once the soldier templates improved, their strength would naturally rise step by step. However, the soldier's weapons and equipment were a major problem. After all, it was impossible to send soldiers with the farmer template straight onto the battlefield. This was not a game, and the soldiers under his command were all Imperial citizens. If he dared treat human lives like grass, the Empire's iron fist was not to be trifled with. The money left over had to be used to buy equipment, and also to maintain a period of training. At the very least, all soldiers had to be raised to the militia template, so that they would have at least some combat power. By then, with Vol himself and the Blue Wolf added in, they could also complete some red copper level missions, and then slowly start recovering financially. And to get through this initial development period faster, he would still have to rely on the battle standard. With a thought from Wall, the troop panel closed and the personal panel opened. Distributable points. Skill points 60. Wall had deliberately saved his skill points yesterday without spending them, precisely for this moment. According to the battle standards classification, skill proficiency from 0 to 9 counts as unmastered, 10 to 29 counts as the beginner stage, and by 30 to 59, it is already proficiently mastered. At 60 to 119, it means mastery of that skill. Beyond that, one can improve even further, reaching stages such as specialization and master. These 60 distributable skill points were enough to raise a skill while had not mastered all the way to initial mastery in one go. As it happened, there was indeed a skill in the battle standard skill tree that could help him. Training. Train your soldiers. Affected by the levels of the related skills you have mastered, soldiers will gain a small amount of experience points and skill proficiency. This was an essential skill for a troop commander, allowing a soldier's combat ability to improve continuously even when there was no war. Because Wall had only been an ordinary student at the vocational school, he had no experience training others, and had not mastered the training skill. But, battle standard, add points. Training 0, training 60. In an instant, Wall felt his consciousness leave his body and rise high into the sky. First reading a vast number of related books, then becoming a recruit squad leader, and training countless ignorant commoners into professional soldiers who dared to fight and kill. When he opened his eyes again, Wall had transformed from a common soldier who knew nothing about organizing training into an instructor capable of skillfully organizing soldiers' training, and had even developed some unique insights into it. So that's how it is. A sharp light flashed in Wall's eyes, and the somewhat lost look he had before was replaced by confidence. Just moments ago, Wall had still been at a loss over how to train his soldiers. But now he was 80% confident that within a week, he could train those 10 lads into qualified militiamen. However, the plan needed to be adjusted a little. He had to get them armed with weapons first. After all, training with wooden sticks and training with real weapons were completely different concepts. At that moment, Wall felt his calf brushed by a large tail, and immediately looked around. only to find that quite a few people were already seated in the tavern eating, while 10 young men carrying bundles were standing at the door. It seemed that in the future, he'd have to find a safer place before allocating points. Thinking this, Wall smiled at the soldiers who had arrived early and said, "Sit down, we'll arrange the other matters after lunch." He lightly beckoned toward the room, and the waiter immediately came over with a businesslike smile. Without waiting for him to speak, Wall directly pulled out 5 small silver moons gleaming with silver light and instructed, 1 10-person stew pot, 1 low-salt steak set, and 2 bottles of fruit wine. The waiter bent over and made 2 quick notes in his pad. "Please wait a moment." The soldiers stuffed their bundles under the wooden table and sat down somewhat stiffly. Wall did not continue studying the battle standard panel, but instead chatted casually with them. Listening to the soldiers describe their usual lives, where they went hungry one meal and full the next, Wall felt somewhat emotional. The gap between the upper and lower limits of the adventurer profession was just too great. Like him, these young men were all active adventurers. It was just that they were the lowest-ranked black iron adventurers, able only to take on some manual labor jobs, with wages that were only enough to get by and left no savings at all. As for the wages that had just been paid out, those with families had already sent them home, while those without families saved them up to plan for the future. At that moment, the waiter brought over a pile of wooden cups and placed 2 clay jugs on the wooden table. The pale green liquor inside sloshed gently, giving off a fresh fragrance. Wall directly picked up the wooden cups and began pouring the wine, passing a cup into each soldier's hand. Only then poured himself a cup. Raising his goblet, Wall's gaze swept across the whole room as he said, "From now on, we are brothers who fight together. Through our actions, we will earn wealth and glory. May the radiance of the God of justice shine upon us." The young warriors all raised their cups together and shouted, "May the radiance of the God of justice shine upon us." After a cup of sweet and sour fruit wine went down, everyone's expressions relaxed and turned cheerful, and a few people's faces even began to redden. The God of justice, Tyr Delagon, the Empire's primary deity of worship, held divine domains such as justice, knighthood, war, and protection. After Wall's screening, everyone present was a casual believer in him. Of course, Wall was as well. Although these people differed in appearance and came from distant hometowns, they were now working together and shared the same faith, so the atmosphere grew increasingly lively. Soon, a big pot of steaming stew was served, with mashed beans and bread as the staple food, along with a large platter of steaks. Everyone thought that was something the captain had ordered for himself, and didn't feel anything was wrong. But the next second, Wall placed the platter of steaks in front of Blue Wolf. The warriors looked surprised, only then realizing that a mighty large dog was actually lying there. Wall solemnly introduced it to them. "My family, Blue Wolf. It is a war dog that once served in the army, with rich combat experience, and is an important fighting force in our team." Everyone suddenly understood, and the way they looked at Blue Wolf immediately turned grave and respectful. In this world, where one might encounter savage beasts, or even demons and evil creatures, just by going out to farm, having a powerful battle pet was perfectly normal. After that, Wall and the others fished out chunks of meat and wild vegetables from the pot, soaked the bread in the gravy, and ate together. As they ate, they chatted, and Wall guided the conversation, beginning to recount some of his own experiences: harsh training, outstanding results, once fighting an entire goblin tribe alone, and even escaping alive from an entire corrupted forest. Although some of it was exaggerated, it was to enhance his prestige and also lay some groundwork for the actions to come. This was also an insight gained from improving his training skills. If training is to have good results, the instructor must first win everyone's respect. This gathering did not take very long. Although meat and fruit wine were not luxuries for these lower-class adventurers, they were not things they could eat every day either, so everyone ate quickly. After the meal ended, under Wall's lead, everyone headed toward his home. Using a key to open the door, which had already been hung with a "for sale" sign, Wall waved his hand. "All right, start moving now." On the way, Wall had already briefly explained the afternoon's work to the warriors under him. Move the furniture out to sell it, then buy supplies, and set up a new camp in the shantytown outside the town. Everyone found it hard to understand. As a fully qualified professional who owned a house in town, something they did not even dare dream of, why would Wall still sell his house and gather people to do adventure missions? But they had already taken the money, eaten the meat, and drunk the wine. Now they had only one thought: obey. "Yes, Captain." Everyone responded in unison and immediately got to work. As for selling off the furniture, it was because according to imperial law, when selling a house, It was just the house. There could not be anything else inside. Even useful furniture had to be cleared out. If Wall were alone, it would take quite a bit of effort. Even if he simply threw it away as trash, he'd still be busy for an entire day. But now he had 10 young, sturdy lads who, although not especially strong, so they could carry it all to the recycling market outside town in one trip and even make a bit of money. Watching everyone bustling about, Wall also began packing up his personal belongings. Several thick cotton quilts, heavy clothes, some spare equipment, and a few sentimental items. This is. Wall picked up something cold to the touch from the bed. It was the birthday gift his good brother Ted had given him yesterday. He had originally thought it was just an ordinary little trinket, but on closer inspection, it turned out to be a silver-inlaid small flask. Click, the lid slid open, and a fragrance that soothed both body and mind wafted out. Wall quickly closed it again to avoid wasting it. It was actually high-quality holy water. This was something that could save lives. Not only could it quickly heal injuries, it could also dispel evil forces. Ordinary holy water was common, but this kind of high-quality holy water could only be produced by priests who had truly received divine grace and blessing, making it extremely rare. Even this small amount, Wall estimated, was worth no less than 1 gold coin, and it wasn't something money alone could buy. After all, those divinely blessed priests were not short of money at all. What a good brother. Placing the silver holy water flask solemnly into the inner pocket of his cloth armor, Wall quietly made up his mind. Once your brother here gets through the hard, early stage of development, I'll definitely take you along to rise to the top. The soldiers were highly motivated, and soon they had removed and carried away the bed, cabinets, storage racks, and even the iron pot by the oven that hadn't been used in 10 years. Finally, they opened the small cellar beneath the pile of odds and ends and dragged out a large leather suitcase. Inside was Wall's spare equipment, 2 sets of thick cloth armor, a curved saber, and a one-handed copper-headed mace, all left behind by his father and very well maintained. After piling everything by the door, everyone started cleaning, stirring up clouds of dust. Wall counted things outside the door and noticed that the neighboring residents seemed to be watching this side warily. To avoid unnecessary trouble, he pointed to the sign hanging on the door, indicating that the house was ready to be sold. 10 years had passed, and these neighbors were no longer the familiar people from before. Bang! Wall shut the door, left the key in the lock, and gradually left the alley with the group carrying bags and bundles. Fortunately, Greenwood Town was built halfway up a mountain, so leaving town meant going downhill, which saved Wall's unit quite a bit of energy. When passing the outer city gate, Wall slipped a little silver moon to the guard, asking him to pass a message to Ted. He was moving away to better pursue his career, so Ted should wait for good news, and next time he'd treat him to a drink. Mouse chewed and worm eaten, just a pile of rotten wood. After carefully examining the pile of disassembled furniture, the furniture merchant shook his head and gave his assessment. But seeing Wall's group of more than a dozen hot-blooded young men, he still added, but with some repairs, it can still barely be used. How about this? I'll take the whole lot for 100 copper coins. Wall was not surprised. Greenwood Town was built against the mountains, and every year it exported large quantities of raw timber, so wooden products were not particularly valuable locally. What was valuable was the carpentry craftsmanship and the lacquer on them. However, he did not immediately agree to the deal, and instead asked, "I'm not just here to sell this furniture. I also want to buy some things." Hearing this, the previously inattentive merchant immediately perked up and revealed a friendly smile. Honored adventurer, sir, just tell me what you need, and I'll definitely satisfy you." Wall gestured with both hands and raised his brows. "Do you have that kind of long pole, sturdy and durable, preferably with a bit of flexibility?" Hearing this, the merchant immediately showed a smile that said he understood, and called over a hired hand to give a few instructions. Very soon, a bundle of long poles was brought over. He introduced them. "Here we have all kinds of ironwood, ash wood, oily wood, and iron-banded wood. Whether it's for propping up clothes or building a frame, the materials here can meet your needs. Of course, as for the price." Seeing the furniture merchant's smooth smile, Wall knew there was hope. Of course, he wasn't really buying clothes poles. He was buying shafts that could serve as spear poles. Then he could buy spearheads and assemble them, and the soldiers' early weapons would be taken care of. Imperial law stipulated that shops had to sell under their registered signboard. If they hung a weapons shop sign, then they could only sell weapons. If they hung a furniture shop sign, naturally they could only sell furniture. In this world full of monsters, the profits from selling weapons were extremely high, and the interests involved were extensive. Fortunately, none of that had anything to do with Wool, an adventurer who had come to buy clothes poles. After picking up each type of wooden pole to test the feel and carefully selecting for a while, Wool finally picked up a blackish-purple wooden pole about 1.8 meters long. Purple wax hardwood pole, selected from the trunk of a 20-year-old tree, handcrafted by a master carpenter, and put through multiple processes such as air drying, shaping, and medicinal soaking. Extremely tough and guaranteed never to warp or crack. It could even withstand chops from blades and swords. The furniture shop merchant launched into an endless introduction, but Wool cut straight to the point. How much? The merchant held up 2 fingers, for only 2 large silver moons. You can immediately own this luxurious, high-class. But Wool immediately waved his hand, his tone firm. Give me an honest price. I want more than just this one. Although Wool's face looked somewhat youthful, his tone was resolute. His distinctive silver-gray hair, long pointed ears, and those 10 young, obedient attendants all showed that this was no easy fat sheep to fleece. The merchant restrained his smile somewhat and said sincerely, "Honored adventurer, may I ask how many you need?" Wool also held up 2 fingers, 20, and I'll need more later. The merchant was first delighted, then showed difficulty and hesitation, and finally gritted his teeth as if making some kind of decision. The Golden Iris Trading Company most likes making friends with brave and fearless adventurers. So this purple wax softwood pole will be sold at cost price, 100 copper each. Wool still kept a straight face and pressed a few more times. Seeing that the other party would not budge further, he finally smiled. The Golden Iris Trading Company's credibility is beyond doubt. I'll take this pole and another 10. If they work well, I'll definitely come again. The merchant did not mind Wool's inconsistency before and after. His smile remained unchanged as he had someone draft the contract and fetch the goods, while also calling for someone to bring over other samples. Leather-covered pot lids, iron-banded door panels, wooden matte armor plates. The merchant introduced them one by one, while Wool silently gave a thumbs up in his heart. Good grief, he had thought selling wooden components for low-end weapons was already bold enough. But they even dared to sell shields as pot lids. And those armorwood armor plates that cost 20 copper coins each, with hardness comparable to steel, fireproof in flames, and unsinkable in water, made Wool extremely tempted. But he had no money. After some haggling, the merchant offered a 10% discount, which finally led Wool to pick another kind of rolling pin the length of a forearm, 10 of them, 20 copper coins each. Compared to everyday expenses, this price was extremely high, but these soldiers would be facing all kinds of monsters in the future. If he tried to save money here, he would only be asking for trouble. Very soon, the 10 cleaned wooden poles were also delivered. After inspecting each one carefully and confirming there were no problems, the 2 finally signed the contract. Wool solemnly took out a heavy gold coin that occupied a third of his palm, with the holy emblem of the god of justice shining on it. Merchant Gilbert wore a pious expression, took off his hat and closed his eyes in prayer, and only then accepted it and carefully verified its authenticity. After making up the change, once the money and goods were exchanged, Wool immediately prepared to leave. Gilbert also stuffed over a wooden chip. If you need to make farm tools, you can consider the Iron Host Smithy in the eastern outer city. Show this to the blacksmith, and it might bring you some discount. Wool suddenly understood they'd even formed an industrial chain. But he had no reason to refuse. He accepted the token, had the soldiers take the long poles and short sticks, and hurried back to Greenwood City without stopping. After asking around, Wool finally found the Iron Host Smithy in a corner of the outer city. From inside came the clanging of metal being forged. When he went in to look, several sturdy men were swinging iron hammers. Seeing someone arrive, a burly middle-aged man with a face full of stubble handed his work to an assistant, then strode over while wiping away sweat. He looked at the wooden slip, raised an eyebrow, and said, "From Gilbert? Let's talk inside." Wool got straight to the point, directly asking to see the goods on hand. The middle-aged burly man was not surprised and quickly brought out all kinds of spearheads and hammerheads. Long ones, short ones, big ones, small ones, serrated ones, hook blade ones, grooved ones, wrought iron, steel laminated, special materials mixed with elemental ore, and even precious pieces inscribed with magical runes. These different styles of spearheads and hammerheads could be used in different situations, and against enemies they specifically countered, they could produce tremendous effects. As for this, Wool chose one about 40 centimeters long, a broad-bladed halberd head whose main body was a wide, long sword-like blade, with a protruding hook blade on one side. This kind of weapon combines the advantages of spear, axe, and hook, making it a versatile all-rounder among polearms. The poleaxe halberd model he chose was quite light, its shape already similar to a pole-mounted double-edged sword. Although it could be used for chopping and slashing, it was more suited to thrusting attacks. As a secondary weapon, Wall chose a wrought iron hammerhead with steel spikes. In many cases, blunt weapons deal more damage than edged ones. Wide-handled earth spike, 100 copper coins each. Anti-collision spiked counterweight, 20 copper coins per piece. Since you were introduced by Gilbert, if you trust us, we can tune your farm tools for free. The middle-aged blacksmith spoke very little. And when Wall tried to chat a bit, perhaps because his trading skill proficiency was too low, it was of no use. He recalled the finished weapon shop he had visited. A fine-quality infantry poleaxe halberd was priced at around 300 copper coins, while his assembled farm tool cost less than 200 copper coins apiece. Yet judging by the quality, there was little difference between the two. In the end, Wall still nodded, signed another contract to purchase farm tools, and took out 1 gold coin and 3 large silver moons to buy 11 wide-handled earth spikes and 10 anti-collision spiked iron counterweights. He also took out an extra 50 copper coins to treat the blacksmiths, helping modify the farm tools to some ale. The middle-aged blacksmith looked a little surprised as he took the money, then nodded. "My name is Gareth. Your, farm tools, I will make sure they can achieve the effect they ought to." While the weapons were being assembled, Wall took 5 soldiers and continued buying supplies in the outer city. In just half a day, they had already spent 3,100 copper coins, equivalent to about 3.1 gold coins. And most of the huge sum taken out that morning had already been used up. It seemed there was no way to buy armor for the time being. He'd think about it after getting the house money. Still, Wall went to a clothing shop, spent 500 copper coins to buy 11 rough blue linen shirts. Although they could not stop blades, swords, or the fangs and claws of monsters, having uniform clothing could greatly improve the team's cohesion. Finally, they bought some food that was easy to store: jerky, beans, and bread bricks as hard as actual bricks. 200 copper coins worth was enough for the team to eat their fill for a week. With sharp infantry halberds sharpened on both sides and heavy short-handled maces in hand, then dressed in matching blue linen shirts, the young adventurers immediately felt their identities change. The captain really wasn't joking. He truly intended to train lowliest laborers like them into real adventurers, and had already started doing so, thinking of fighting those terrifying monsters in the future. Fear and worry uncontrollably rose in the hearts of the young people, but when they thought of Wall's series of actions and conduct, a certain longing also began to grow. Perhaps, by following Wall, one day they really could become true adventurers, and have their own deeds sung by those bards throughout the Swift Eagle territory. No, throughout the entire empire. Seeing the soldiers holding their weapons with excitement and enthusiasm, Wall secretly let out a sigh of relief. As long as these young people weren't afraid, judging by how they looked, with just a little polishing, they could become truly reliable soldiers. Taking up a poleaxe, Wall demonstrated on the spot, thrusting, lifting, parrying, chopping, and hooking thrusts. The blade's shadow flew in all directions like streaks of light cutting through the air, the silvery sharpness with an invisible trajectory sending chills down people's spines. As a warrior class professional, although Wall mainly practiced swordsmanship, he was also quite proficient with other military weapons, and it was no problem for him to awe these young people who had previously only handled farm tools. Familiarizing himself with the poleaxe in his hands, hearing the gasps and exclamations coming from beside him, the corners of Wall's mouth lifted slightly. He planted the poleaxe upright, withdrew his stance, and said, "I will teach you all of this. As long as you follow orders and train seriously, you'll soon be able to reach this level too." Hearing this, the soldiers' eyes lit up with expectation, and they straightened their chests as they shouted haphazardly, "Yes, Captain, I will definitely train hard." Wall made no comment, stroking the blade edge of the poleaxe in his hand. 2.3 meters long, weighing about 4 kilograms, with a tough shaft that wasn't slippery in the hand and excellent balance. It could both thrust and chop, and it also had a thrusting blade that could pierce armor. Truly a fine weapon. The poleaxe could be used in all kinds of combat scenarios, and it could also hold its own against monsters with tough hides and large bodies. What pleased him was that the blacksmith had not simply assembled the weapon's parts, but had deliberately spent extra effort balancing them and adding an iron butt spike to the end of the wooden shaft, which could be used both to hammer enemies and to drive the poleaxe diagonally into the ground to resist an enemy charge. After letting the soldiers rest for a while in the blacksmith shop's courtyard, by the time the sun had withdrawn its light and heat and was sinking toward the mountains, All of Vol's weapons had finally been completed. Bidding farewell to the middle-aged blacksmith, Vol distributed the short-handled maces to each soldier, but gathered up the poleaxes, afraid they might hurt their own people. Then, carrying bags and bundles of luggage, he started walking toward the outside of the city. To train soldiers, there had to be a wide-open space. Inside the city was out of the question. Outside the city, Vol ultimately chose to set up camp beside the carpentry workshop, where there was enough open ground, and the noise from training wouldn't disturb other people. Heading west out of the city, it wasn't long before a cluster of low buildings made of wood, leaves, and mud appeared before their eyes. With disorderly shacks packed one next to another, noisy clamor coming from inside. Because the Empire did not allow people to sleep on the streets, many of the lower-class people who depended on the town for survival could only build simple dwellings outside the city. As soon as he drew near, Vol felt several pairs of eyes secretly watching him, and the blue wolf, unrestrained by any leash, also moved back and forth through the group. Its ears pricked alertly. But he was no longer all alone now. With the soldiers crowding around him, they quickly passed through several dirt alleys and saw an open field where crops were growing. Continuing forward along the edge of this shanty town, after half an hour he could gradually hear the sound of flowing water, while the number of people living in the nearby shantytown gradually thinned out. Will had already inquired about this in advance. This area was originally close to the river, making water convenient to access. So many people lived nearby. But starting last year, monsters would occasionally suddenly crawl out of the river and attack residents. However, those living nearby were all penniless, with no money at all to hire adventurers to clear out the monsters. Fortunately, those monsters would not stray far from the riverbank, so moving a bit farther away was enough. Wool, however, was not afraid. After all, rumors of these monsters had been around for quite some time, yet to this day there was still no record of them killing anyone, and he had 10 sturdy young men with him. When the time came, if he couldn't outrun the monsters, couldn't he at least outrun these young men? Finding a fairly flat patch of open ground, Wool shrugged the bundle off his back. We'll make camp here. Tidy things up, we're starting to cook. At the mention of food, the soldiers immediately perked up. They quickly cleared an open space, gathered stones and branches, and built a fire pit. Then set up the iron pot Wool had brought from home on top. They filled it halfway with clean river water, and only when the water was bubbling away did they start adding ingredients: diced cured meat, beans, and some vegetables. Before long, a fragrant aroma spread throughout the entire camp. Wool did not do it himself. A soldier named Alvin had volunteered, and it looked like he was doing a pretty good job. The soldiers were in high spirits. What could be happier than having eaten meat at noon and then getting to eat meat again in the evening? Dinner was 2 big bowls of salted pork and vegetable soup per person, paired with hard bread that had been toasted again until it gave off a charred aroma, creating a unique flavor. After the meal, everyone chatted idly for a while and got much more familiar with one another. When both moons had risen into the night sky, only then did Wool stand up, immediately drawing everyone's attention. From today on, we can be considered to have embarked on our journey of adventure. We need sufficient rest to face training, but at the same time we must also stay vigilant. Wool pointed at the bundles piled with food and weapons. If we don't want our wealth to quietly slip away, then someone must stay awake at all times. Seeing that everyone wholeheartedly agreed, Wool began assigning duties, splitting them into groups of 2 to take turns standing watch through the night. Watching the soldiers honestly follow his arrangements. Those who should sleep slept, and those who should keep watch kept watch, while Wool took out his long sword and began training in the firelight. After adding points to his physique last night, Wool had only felt the vitality in his body improve, and had not yet had the chance to study and experience it. But now, upon careful sensing, he actually discovered that his vitality had increased to more than double what it was before adding the points. A powerful physique was the foundation of a warrior. With such vigorous vitality, it was only a matter of time before he advanced to become an advanced class professional. Since he was in an unstable environment, Wool only trained a little before taking off his leather armor and cloth armor, and fell asleep beneath the stars and moon. Woof, woof. A few low barks startled Wool awake. It was the green wolf's voice. Something was happening. By reflex, he rolled over and grabbed his longsword, and saw 2 soldiers with weary faces and dazed eyes. Captain. Wool raised a hand to stop the words they were about to say in explanation, and stared fixedly into the darkness in the direction of the river. There, a short figure was running, and soon disappeared from sight. More than 10 seconds later, a big dog emerged from the darkness. Green Wolf. Wool hurried forward to check. The green wolf was completely unharmed and raised its paw to gesture to him a few times. By the faint firelight, Will noticed quite a bit of liquid on its paw. With a swipe of his finger, he roughly guessed the situation just now. It was probably the slime of some kind of amphibious monster. Its nest should be nearby. It hid by day and came out at night, and it was not very strong. But it is very alert and slippery, and even Qing Lang failed to catch it. It doesn't seem to be a big problem. After this scare, that monster probably won't come back again for a while. After offering a few words of encouragement to the soldiers on night watch, Wall no longer felt sleepy either. He took a notebook out of his pack and began organizing his training plan. After an unknown amount of time, the familiar golden light cut through the darkness, and the whole world returned to brightness.